friends. Today I'm going to talk about an article that pissed me off so badly that I basically didn't sleep for 24 hours straight. Well, this wasn't the only thing, there were several things. But it is this article, this utter and complete insult to the field of medicine and scientific research in general, as well as the insult to the intelligence of any functional adult capable of establishing the value of the strength of a reputably indicated scientific correlation. But let us not yet tie ourselves down into the details too much just yet. Yes, let us look at this heinous headline from the Telegraph. Telling women not to drink during pregnancy. Sexist. Oh, fuck me running. This is some next level shit. So basically when I saw this, yeah, there is no way I'm not going to touch this with a scientific ruler and rap this pseudo-intellectual heresy over the knuckles so hard it would make Sister Margaret blush. Anyway, the article claims that there is an oppressive government-based initiative to make women feel ashamed for the consumption of alcohol while pregnant. Well, gee golly gosh, I wonder why the fuck that might be. But hey, let's listen to the argument for the sake of arguments. The claim is that by not allowing women to drink alcohol during pregnancy, or more accurately, by publicly discouraging it, it is not illegal. They're free to do it. We're just going to look at you with very scornful eyes. We are somehow removing pregnant women from society through stigmatization? Oh honey, there are very people who know a hell of a lot more about stigmatization in society from a social science perspective, but we'll keep going. I mean, after all, the only way adult humans can socialize according to this narrative is through the consumption of alcohol, right? Let's not even get into social science. Let me stop you right there. Let's not even get into science. Do you see this martini glass in my hand, lads? What does it represent to ya? Could it be that I thoroughly enjoy in the partaking and consumption of alcoholic beverages, as have most humans for the course of our history, if for no reason other than the fact that because it was often the preferable choice for the health of civilization, in contrast to the drinking of contaminated water, but also because my Welsh and Irish genetics ensure that alcohol is not just a friend to me, but a friend to humanity in general. And yes, alcohol is humanity's friend, and I would very much argue, how could we abandon a friend? Well, here's when you abandon a friend. When that friend is mutilating or causing some type of permanent disability to your child. Oh, I won't get too into my personal shit, but I will say this. Were I capable of having children, you could bet your sweet ass lass I would be willing to say goodbye to my dear friend. Why? Because having a child means your life and body, as much as feminists might like to argue to the contrary, and hey, I'm technically pro-choice, means that those things are no longer solely your own. You are now responsible for another human life. And given that, even already in the first 2 paragraphs of this article, the author notes that there is an association, and we will get there, friends. You know, you don't get shit from me without a little bit of science. Even as they associate and understand that there is an association with fetal alcohol syndrome, they're still willing to throw this to the curb. I wonder where the term fetal alcohol syndrome comes from. Could it be the prenatal consumption of alcohol? Still, we must not stigmatize women for being incapable of putting down the bottle, I guess. Look, if I could have a kid, do you know how fast I would lay down my martini glass? Maybe it's just some bizarre tendency I have of not being a completely self-absorbed psychopath, but for me, at least, if I knew I had to pick between ruining my own body through a massive consumption of the sweet angelic nectar we know as ethanol and ruining someone else's, you know, an innocence from the first second that they exist as a human being, oh, well, I'm afraid my pathetic human ethics would kick in and make me bite the proverbial bullet. Let's just keep chugging along with this topic at hand, though, shall we? Anyway, so the basis of this argument is this: that social exclusion as a result of an inability to consume alcohol is somehow sexist to pregnant women. Various social psychological data, actually almost countless data, indicate that there are negative effects of social exclusion. All of social identity theory, in fact, is based upon that notion. As usual, check out Tajfel and Turner. However, I failed to see in this article any indication or data that indicates the consumption of alcohol is somehow a prerequisite for proper adult social group interaction. No research that I have ever read in the study of group theory indicates that alcohol is required. That implies that there are no such things as sober people or sober groups. That's ridiculous. regardless of the historical importance of alcohol consumption, or the importance of alcohol that has lasted throughout the entirety of human civilization, which until more recently in our development was really not entirely so much for the purpose of intoxication, but rather, again, for the avoidance of things like disease, and for the consumption of nutrients. In this current year, you ignorant bint. And as such, we don't need booze to survive, nor does one need a drink in order to socialize. Sure, perhaps it makes it easier, beer goggles and all that, but really that's mostly in the context of awkward sexual flirtation, is it not? And I certainly hope there aren't too many expectant mothers out there cruising bars with their beer goggles on, but hey, maybe I am just expressing my latent self-hatred and internalized misogyny, aren't I? Oh, I'm so sorry, I'm such a terrible person. According to a previous Telegraph article, however, there was some controversy involving the chief British medical officer, Sally Davies, who encouraged everyone to decrease their alcohol consumption. Well, lass, if you're the chief medical officer for the United Kingdom, including Scotland, North Ireland, and my own people, the Welsh, probably not a bad suggestion. It's not like we have a habit or anything. I mean, we're not well known for our abstinence when it comes to the drink. Specifically, the ire of this author of this current Telegraph article, and others, is that Davies' suggestion that pregnant women ideally avoid alcohol altogether is somehow sexist. I'm a little less stringent. I have seen some evidence that indicates a glass or two of red wine once, maybe twice a week, is harmless, and potentially even beneficial to blood flow. But friendos, you're listening to a social psychologist here, a social scientist, so don't take my fucking word on that. But here's some scientific data I'll throw out for you. You can judge this for yourselves. There will be a link in the description. Now we'll get into the complexities and the issues of ethics, which is something I can actually speak to, which is the purpose of this video, because anytime I talk about any shit, and I don't give at least some kind of undergraduate level lesson on social science, I feel as if I've failed in my job. And that's why I'm talking to you about this right now, and beyond my own intense, palpable rage at this article, that there's a bunch of fucking roasties out there who will read this kind of garbage pseudoscience and use it as a personal excuse to destroy two lives at once. Meanwhile, I'm barren as a fucking Mojave.
Patrolling the Mojave almost makes you wish for a nuclear winter.
Yes, I'm a little bit salty. Moving on, Dr. Ellie Lee, director of the Center of Parenting Culture Studies at the University of Kent, said this: "The exclusion of women from an ordinary activity on the basis of a precaution was, quote, sexist." Yeah, that's where the titular quote comes from. This is, as far as I can tell, also including the previous suggestion that pregnant women not consume more than 2 units per week, which was the prescriptive 2 units per week. They were saying that was fine, and yet it's still fucking sexist. Even with that exception. It's somehow sexist because Kellyanne can't go out and get totally fucking wasted while she's 3 months pregnant. It is so difficult for me not to jump so hard into the science here before I've finished reading this article, friends, but let's just keep powering through it. Public disclosure has become very hostile, and there is now an assumption that a pregnant woman holding a glass of wine is somehow absolutely wrong, she said. Bitch, I don't care if I see you holding a glass of wine in public. If it's your weekly glass and you are so thin-skinned that you find it sexist for me looking at you, by the way, I would wager though, and I have no statistical data on this, that it would be other women, generally speaking, and not men, other women giving you the stink eye over your glass of wine because they would see it and perceive you as abusing your baby. So again, not sure where the sexism angle comes from. You're the one who needs to prove that this is somehow sexist if that's what you're claiming it is. How would you possibly indicate that this is a male-oriented thing? Again, I would surmise, I don't have the data, but I would surmise that the people who would judge you for excessive drinking while pregnant are going to be overwhelmingly female. As I am, bitch. Women are being accosted, spoken to, and started at in public. Yeah, again, just cope with it like the rest of the planet. If it's really that this is your 1 glass of wine a week, deal with it. If you are so thin-skinned and you are so delicate, and I'm just such a sensitive little baby emotionally, When that kid comes out of your fucking stomach, you're going to have to take real emotional responsibility. You can't play these kinds of games anymore. This is absolutely goddamn absurd. I mean, this is really breaking my fucking skull. You think I give any fucks if someone is judging me while I knock back hard liquor in public? Then again, I'm not pregnant. But no, I don't care. Go grow a spine, you daft cunt. People assume that just because you've had one drink, you've had a bottle of vodka for breakfast. And, again, for the last time, why do you care about their assumptions? Why do you care so deeply what someone else thinks about you? You know what I think?
That sounds like your problem, nigga.
So she says it is impossible to establish safe levels of exposure to alcohol during pregnancy. My fucking growth. Okay, this, friends, is what really collates my cashews. Oh my sweet fuck. Today, friends, we're going to learn about scientific ethics and correlational versus causal experimental data and research. But again, Aiden, hold back, hold the fuck back, pull that rage in and build it like your own blood alcohol levels as you get through this article and finish it. The BPPS, which, by the way, is the British Pregnancy Advisory Service, is also campaigning for a change in the tone of the advice on the basis that it may be needlessly scaring women into aborting pregnancies because of fears that a few heavy nights out will have harmed the fetus serious harm. A few heavy nights out? No worries, ladies, when you're preggers. Are you fucking daft? Holy shit, I can't read these British articles. I'll start calling all trucks lorries and using the word arse, which I've specifically been told is extremely cringy coming from America Burgers, but chaps, I can't help it when I read this type of reprobate bollocks. Maybe I have a misunderstanding of the term heavy night out, because then I'm going to be sitting in my apartment drinking Sobieski till I black out. That's called heavy drinking. And if I was pregnant, yeah, I'd probably think that's going to be fairly damaging to the fetus. Maybe my perspective is warped though. What's your definition? Oh, you don't define it? Okay, fine. Claire Murphy, the organization's director of external affairs, said, "There can be real consequences to overstating evidence or implying certainty when there isn't any." Oh, there's no evidence, is there? The locus of proof is now upon you, my dear lady, if that's what you claim. There's no evidence. You need to prove that then, if you're going to make that kind of claim. The thing is that you are shouting into a storm of evidence with nothing. Doing so can cause women needless anxiety and alarm, sometimes to the point that they consider ending an unplanned but not unwanted pregnancy because of fears they have caused irreparable harm. Not to be a bitch, but potentially a good idea. If you're 3 or more months pregnant and you've been drinking like a fish, it's very possible you really have caused irreparable harm. But again, I'm sorry, I know I've gotten a little bit testy here. Let's hear the end of their argument. After all, we are almost done, and once we're done, I will start to truly decimate this bullshit. But just as importantly, it assumes women cannot be trusted to understand risk, and when it comes to alcohol, the difference between low and heavy consumption. Yeah, I get the feeling you're not talking about low consumption, because as your own chief medical officer's 2-unit per week prescription is what you're taking umbrage with. Yeah, I don't think you're talking about low consumption. You're talking about extreme, high, medium to high consumption, right? What you are in fact suggesting is an end to any potential public castigation of medium to massive alcohol consumption by pregnant women. Real fucking neato! This advice is not about policing pregnant women's behavior. It is about giving them unbiased information and enabling them to make the choice that is right for them, said Janet File, RCM Professional Policy Advisor. Cumulative and regular alcohol consumption in pregnancy could have an impact on the health and well-being of the mother and baby. Let's end aptly on the last line of this article so I can start my own personal tirade. Accurate data on the effects of moderate alcohol consumption during pregnancy is almost impossible to achieve because it would be unethical to initiate wide-scale studies which compared the outcomes for children of drinkers to those of non-drinkers. Alrighty, let's get into data, friends. Let me explain to you folks what that line means, and what this entire line of argumentation that they're making in this article is indicative of, and what these crazy bitches are referring to. Essentially, in this line, and in several of the earlier lines, what people like Dr. Lee were referring to when suggesting that the true detriments of alcohol consumption during pregnancy have not been proven are this: correlation versus causation. Now, don't get me wrong, myself and pretty much every other scientist will always, of course, give preference to causal data, meaning that when we can show definitively that X leads to Y through the use of statistical analysis and regression, yes, of course we prefer that. However, in order to obtain causal data, experimental methodology must be utilized, no matter how excellent your correlational experimental design, because you can do correlational experimental designs, I sure have. No matter how exquisite that is, if it's a semi-experiment, causal data cannot be ascertained. That means we must have at the most minimum an experimental group and a control group which can be measured over time, including pre-testing and post-testing. The problem in that lies that it is unfathomably unethical to conduct a long-term study involving the introduction of a known toxic element like alcohol, like ethanol, to a developing fetus as an experimental test group. That is a disgusting violation of every piece of ethics of science. We cannot conduct such research. It is Dr. Mengele tier. Let me explain. Some of you may remember I mentioned not too long back the Milgram experiments, which, in addition to some of Philip Zimbardo's early work in the 1960s and early 70s, were the reasons for the introduction of the Institutional Review Boards, the IRB, even for us in the social sciences. But in medicine, it goes back far, far further. You could look at no greater exemplar than the Tuskegee experiments, wherein predominantly poor black men were paid a living wage essentially to be injected with syphilis to study the effects of the disease in contrast with an unaffected control group. That's what you're looking at. That is the type of experiment that this woman will be asking for in order to prove what she is desiring as indication that women should not drink. That this is the type of experiment we would need to do. Of course, this experiment is not possible in our state of scientific rigor. That type of experimentation, as I said, on a fetus would be no different than the Tuskegee research. As such, knowing that we would have to do and collect these longitudinal data to indicate the harms of massive alcohol consumption, and as we do have significant correlational data to indicate what a mother consumes and comes in contact with during the pregnancy could potentially affect the fetus, very hard correlational data, the very notion of this experimental study of the effects of alcohol consumption from moderate to massive are, in my perspective, and I'm being completely honest, the perspective of every single scientist on the planet, as I am sure Dr. Lee is very well aware of, is again on par with Tuskegee. As such, people like Dr. Lee knows this research will never be conducted, and as a result, we can never, without any question, prove a total causal link between prenatal alcohol consumption and fetal alcohol syndrome or any other negative effects to the fetus associated with the introduction of ethanol. She knows that full fucking well, as someone with a PhD, that we can produce thousands upon thousands of pieces of correlational data. But ethically, again, we would be Mengele ourselves to even suggest the conduction of such an experimental piece of research. Also, we can't even rely on most self-reporting in many of these cases, which is scant because of the very stigma that she is describing here as sexism, that women who overdrink during pregnancy will not report that they did it. She knows this, which is why she touts the improvable nature of the claim that alcohol consumption during pregnancy is negative. Do you see, though, how utterly repulsive and disingenuous this is? She, as someone with some moderately advanced level of understanding about how research works, is flaunting the very fact that we cannot ethically conduct this experimentation that we have excessive and abundant correlational evidence to indicating that it will result in the permanent mental and physical deformity of the fetus. She knows that, and she's weaponizing it. Therefore, my question is why? Why? For what fucking purpose could one have for such a repugnant claim, knowing that we cannot prove the causal evidence? Therefore, we should make no claim at all? Because we cannot prove the causal relationship? Oh, could it be the cause of cultural Marxism? Could that be why? Could that be why you don't want us to be able to just use our correlational evidence to say, hey, you probably shouldn't get smashed when you're preggers? Yeah, it's cultural Marxism. Because people like Dr. Lee would probably be quite pleased to see more women give birth to deformed children and have those women and their children rely on the state. Because, of course, as a Marxist, people like Dr. Lee don't believe in things like intelligence quotient being related to academic success. They believe that women should be reliant on the state. They believe that children should be reliant on the state. They believe the state is the father. This, folks, is the cancer of cultural Marxism. A woman like Dr. Lee will happily and readily encourage women to down shot after shot because, hey, after all, you're a young, pregnant woman that needs to socialize and pay no mind to the fucking developing fetus in your womb, because she likely also supports the same concepts of the nanny state that I just described. Hey, so what if your kid has fetal alcohol syndrome? We're all entirely equal, after all. There's no difference if you have fetal alcohol syndrome or if you don't. We're all totally equal in our beautiful Marxist utopia. Can you fucking imagine being a product of this kind of environment as a child? A mother who, because of this kind of narrative, would rather have socialized with her friends than have been responsible, knowing the state would care for any possible, if unlikely, because of course there's no irrefutable causal data like Dr. Lee has said for the issues of your child, and then as such you must grow up with physical and mental differences at best and actual disabilities at the most? How fucking selfish is this insane concept of ultra-collectivism at heart? Dr. Lee, you and your ilk, you know, I know that you know, that there are more than 400 associated conditions, disorders, and effects that are related to fetal alcohol syndrome. But let's just mention a few of the main ones to put it into perspective for you. Issues that you are hand-waving as unimportant in comparison to a woman maybe feeling a little bit uncomfortable in social situations while pregnant because she can't get smashed. Here are some of them from the CDC. Abnormal facial features, such as smooth ridge between the nose and upper lip, small head size, shorter than average height, low body weight, poor coordination, hyperactive behavior, difficulty with attention, poor memory, difficulty in school, particularly with math, learning disabilities, speech and language delays, intellectual disability or low IQ, poor reasoning and judgment skills, sleep and sucking problems as a baby, vision or hearing problems, problems with the heart, kidney, or bones. And yet, what's the real issue here for Dr. Lee and these people? Is it these problems that will be faced by the children? Of course not. It's ensuring that Sydney can get sloshed with her girlfriends and not feel left out or ostracized by others in public as they see her knocking back shots into her knocked up pregnant belly. Sexism is the real issue here, right? Go fuck yourself, you intellectually dishonest cunt. And go fuck anyone who supports this kind of rigmarole. This is the absolute antithesis of science. This is disgusting, and this is just outright wrong. It really made me so sick I couldn't fall asleep. And I hope I've explicated why. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe. I'm Aiden Paladin, Altana Volt.